My name is Tony Williams. I'm in outside sales, specializing in windows. So I came in the company doing our inside sales, working in the call center. From day one, it's all about growth here. Which other places, this is what you do, you just do it. Here, when they say improve it, it's not meaning just the customers, but the employees as well. I was in the call center for a few years. Still the same me, same personality, so everyone knew me, but they just knew me as being in the call center. So actually, definitely was someone else urging me and pushing me. They came up to me and said, why are we in a meeting talking about a manager when you're here? We got you. This is what you should be doing. Do you want to be a manager? Well, yeah. Okay, well then let them know that, and let them know that whatever they need you to do, you're going to do it to get in that position, and that's exactly what I did. It's all about accountability. Sometimes you got to look in the mirror and say, if this is what I want, figure out a plan how to get there. And if you don't have that plan, chances are someone will help you construct that plan because they may know exactly how to get there. The company itself makes my job a lot easier. Being family owned and operating, having that tenure, being around since 1989, these are huge things when it comes to a home improvement company. To be here from 1989 says a whole lot about the company, and obviously we're doing something right. Having Brian and Seth here every day, having the best warranty, the best products in the industry, I'm giving a good lead, someone who we know has a need. The marketing does a great job. With the branding. When we come in and we have shirts that say improve it, and we don't look like, Chuck in a truck and Dan in a van, from all of the managers and all of the other sales reps. We're all on a group text trying to push each other, help each other. It takes a lot of the outside kind of noise and chaos out of it and lets you just focus on the objective. They're not just throwing you out there and saying, okay, bring back the bacon. They're giving you every tool that you need in order to do that. Makes my job a lot easier, for sure. Growth is tremendous here. There's a wonderful opportunity to be exactly where you want to be within this company. The opportunities are huge. Everyone gets an email every time that there is a new position opened up. So if you have the skill set and qualifications, sky's the limit, so to speak. If you're passionate about it, it takes away the work kind of aspect to it. I get to meet new people every day, hear stories that I never would have heard otherwise. So, and at the end of the day, we're helping people. If you're looking, for a place to work and have opportunities to grow, have a support system, I think we kind of set the precedent. All of that combined just makes this a place that I can't ever see myself leaving. So.